Alright everyone, Two-Tone back, and I promised it to you, so here it is, Spyral Ishizu. This is going to be a long intro, so I wouldn't mind if you skipped ahead, because there's a lot to explain with this deck. But, got a lot to talk about, let's get to it. But before I do that, I'd like to give a big shout out to Kevin OG, Saint, Psychic Young, a bunch of people in the Spyral Discord on the Master Duel Meta Discord. They've been helping out with this deck. We've all been kind of brewing together and coming up with ideas for it and testing, and lots of valuable input and opinions there. And I wouldn't even gotten to this build without their help. So big shout outs to them. A lot of credit their way. But this is the build that I've been playing, so it's going to be the one I kind of explain and describe to you. So shoutouts taken care of. Let's talk about the deck. As you can see, it's quite a mashup. You're running all your Spyral names that are necessary to run Spyral. You're running all the Ishizu monsters because you need a maximum number of shufflers and millers, and that's all of them. And you're running most of the tiers, though you are kind of slimming down on a few for deck space reasons and for kind of gameplay purposes, and I'll explain that in a little bit. The general premise here is that the TEARLAMENTS is one of the decks that runs like the most gas in Yu-Gi-Oh history. Its deck is just all gas all the time because it main decks hand traps like Havnus and Keldo, so it doesn't have to play hand traps. And the idea is that in the tier mirror, it's a really grindy mirror, so long as it doesn't just become Abyss Roller Turbo. And so the concept here is that you have way more gas than even the hyper gaseous tier deck. Because you have all these Spyral cards that aren't limited to once per turns, or can be played on top of the once per turns that all the TEARLAMENTS have. One of the real, if you can call it a weak point, but actual weak points of TEARLAMENTS is like once they've done their 3 fusions, they're not doing a whole lot more on the turn, whereas I can go into an entire bevy of link plays on top of my 3 fusions. Downside is, of course, I'm running a 60-card deck, so I'm not as consistently milling the tier cards and getting into the tier strategy, but I am more consistently accessing the Spyral cards and milling Spyral cards, which are good to have in the graveyard, which is where they kind of coalesce into one homogeneous deck that does stuff. This is the most extreme, like high gas power level version of the decks. There are like non-60 card variants that are like, between, 48, 52-ish cards in that kind of general area around 50 cards that are also pretty reasonable because it increases your good mill count, but you lose out on some power cards in the process. And I maybe explain that at the end of the video as like an alternative variant, but this is the one I'm playing, so it's going to be the one I'm talking about. The basic premise from the Spyral side of things is that the Spyral engine can guarantee access to the TEARLAMENT side of the engine via, well, you guessed it, Curious, everyone's good friend who's been in basically every video I've ever frickin' made going back to Halka-Fibrax. This card can send this relatively newly released Rainbow Bridge of Salvation. This is a very funny Crystal Beast support card, but it's generic because you can send it off Curious, chain it to Curious's effect, so you can get the effect before Curious does the triple mill, so you don't risk milling your Garnet in the form of Tortoise, and then you get to add Perlarino. So the Spyral combo guarantees you access to Perlarino, which is a huge deal in the mirror match. This card is the most important card in the mirror match so long as both decks have their engines online. It's just incredibly busted, both for the attack gain ability and the removal effect. That's just one more interaction on the board as a field spell, which is a big deal. And another funny interaction is that the Crystal Beast you can add, Crystal Beast Emerald Tortoise, gives you an Aqua in hand. And as people who might have tried to make Kick Callus before know, having an extra Aqua monster around does come up. Sometimes you don't mill two tier names off of like a random mill card, like a Nagito or something, and you don't have any Aquas and you can't do anything. But when you do this side of the combo, you always have a spare Aqua in hand in the form of the Turtle. So, you'll usually grab either Rhino Heart or Sheeran off the Perlarino, and then you have this guaranteed extra Aqua in hand to use as gas or even as a discard off Sheeran to kind of get your fusion plays going. So you get a +2 off that, and get access to Perlarino and do your whole tier setup. And that's what the Spyral side of the deck brings to it, as well as like link plays. Obviously, I got Unicorn, Appaloosa, Axis Kotaker, the whole gamut of cool dudes. So I'm going to do a little card-by-card breakdown. It's try to go through it pretty quickly, but I want to explain some things in this deck that you might have questions about, and explain like where and what you could cut to kind of make room for other cards you might want to play. So, starting off, obviously you're running 3 quick fixes. It's the best normal summon in Spyral. You want to run 3 because it's a great mill. It's one of the things that you love milling off your tiers and your Ishizus. You can just bounce it back to the field, add a card. Pretty solid. Drone, you have to have your 1 drone. It's mandatory, especially when it's royal. 3 souls. No one's going to be surprised by that. Puts Master Plan in the graveyard, so you don't have to worry about milling it. You're running your your Merleys and your Havnesses, of course. You're running the Garnet, the good old turtle. You don't want to draw him, but you do want to see him eventually in the game. Obviously, you run one Snow. Snow's in there whenever you have access to Rainbow Bridge, which this deck can get to without Curious. Snow is your secondary mill target, and you just want to mill it. When you're doing chain milling, having this card in the graveyard is busted. And when you're a 60-card deck, you can abuse Snow more actively and more frequently than regular 40-card tier decks. Agent and Last Resort are a little self-explanatory. Agent's a little more important than normal in this variant because it can set up rank 4 plays, and as you might have noticed from this format so far, Abyss Dweller is the king of the format. Last Resort, you can, I think, and I'm going to explain kind of why during the combo portion, the first combo of this little tutorial. I think you can cut Last Resort. I don't actually think it's necessary. I still have it in there, maybe for nostalgia's sake, maybe for like card and hand quality because of quick fix, but I don't actually think it's that important anymore, so this is actually a cuttable card now. Double Sheeran, of course. I'm only running 2 Rhino Heart instead of the typical 3 in most Tearlaments decks. The general thing is, in regular Tearlaments, aside from maybe normal summoning Merle, you don't have a necessary normal summon besides Rhino Heart, so running 3 of this dude is perfectly reasonable. In Spyral, you want a normal summon Quick Fix a lot of the time, so you do want a couple of Rhino Hearts just as a mill target and an add target off like your Soliek or your Perlerino, but otherwise, you don't want to max out on this guy because seeing him in your opening hand isn't that good because he doesn't do anything like maybe a Sheeran might or a Havness might, and he's just kind of clogging up your hand sometimes. So, I'm not maxing out on him for that reason. You have to max out on all of your Ishizus because, one, you need the mill power of both Agido and Kelbeck. This deck is 60, so you need to mill more than even a regular tier deck, so you do have to max out on these guys. And Kelbeck's a hand trap, so that counts for something. And the Shufflers, aside from Abyss Dweller, these are the most important cards in the format. Shuffling cards is what the game revolves around at this point with these dudes, and they're super important, especially because like you have one-ofs like Sleeper and Big Red and even sometimes Resort that you need to shuffle back when you're doing your own combo so you can add them later. So yeah, you need to max out on these guys for obvious reasons. Also, they like make a rank 4. Like they're all kind of like a bunch of them can special summon themselves in different ways, and you can make a Abyss Dweller with them because of that. Double Master Plan. You could argue for a third Master Plan in this deck. You are chain milling a whole lot, so like having secondary ways to get into Master Plan is pretty useful. But I just settled on the typical 2 just because I was trying to make room in the deck. That's basically it. Sleeper doesn't really need an introduction. Inboard boss monster, and in a format where a lot of people's only out to boards is Zeus. Going into a Baguska attacking stuff and making Zeus, or going into a Abyss Dweller attacking stuff and making Zeus, having a card that is just targeted removal at quick speed is super important. So this guy's like more important than even usual. Illusion of Chaos, pretty self-explanatory. It fetches Souls fetches Master Plan. That's all that. Terraforming's better than normal because you had Spyral Resort or Perlerino. Instant Fusion is the instant win card because it makes kick Callus without any interaction, besides like if they have a roll Callus up or some nonsense. 1-for-1. I'm actually kind of mid on 1-for-1 these days. It's been in the past Spiral's most powerful card, though there's always the risk of it being ashed or whatever. Nowadays, the material in hand is actually fairly important sometimes, so 1-for-1 has kind of been awkward for me in certain situations. I think you could actually cut 1-for-1 this version of the deck because you're not really trying to do just Spiral stuff, and that card in hand is a lot more important, especially in these grindy tier mirrors. Preparation Rites, this is also a cuttable card. You want to max out on Souls and Illusion of Chaos because you want to mill monsters off your tier cards just in case you need to like go into a Dragstapelia or a Mood Dragon off of your mills, and all you got, these guys are dark monsters, so they can do fulfill that requirement. Preparation Rites does not do that, and as you can see, we're not running Selene in the extra, so you're not trying to max out on spells to turn Selene active with her spell counter, so this is also cuttable. So if you have like, let's say you really wanted to run Maxi, maybe cut Preparation Rites, 1-for-1, and Last Resort. I wouldn't blame you for that. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. Foolish Burial Goods. This card is fairly insane. So, as I mentioned, Perlerino is the most important tier card that you can access, and this obviously can send Rainbow Bridge, so this is just, 3 more copies of Terraforming. Just with that, it can also send Soliek. So on top, even if you already have access to your Perlerino, you can send a Soliek and add any tier monster. So it's Rhoda for tiers. You can send Scream. Sorry, you can send Scream, which lets you add your Crime for your Omni Negate or your Soliek for your Tear plays on their turn plus a negate. So like it's all of that, plus it has the utility that's always had in Spyral of sending your missions to kind of turn on your Spyral combos. It's just an all-around insane card in this particular version of the deck. Grass. This is kind of the reason you play 60. Grass is insane. Everyone's already milling a ton of cards, so like if they've milled a lot and you can kind of like force through a lot of their interactions and then just slam a grass on the table as soon as they've committed to their Rule Callus or some nonsense, this card just wins the game. It's insane. Big Red. In the past, I've run double Big Red once we got 2 quick fixes. One for value purposes, and 2 because there were a lot of times you would have to like quick fix discard the second Big Red that you searched to make Celine active before you summoned her, and that was really relevant. Not relevant anymore, and with the even though this is a mill deck and you risk milling your 1 Big Red, you do have the shufflers to shuffle it back and add it to hand later with your quick fix, because quick fix isn't like a tier card that you have to activate when it's milled. You can kind of like just save your quick fix until you get your Big Red back in your deck, if you do mill it. So you only run 1, you only need to run 1, because even if it gets to a turn 3 and you want a Big Red again, you can shuffle another Big Red back and then make quick fix, add Big Red, right? The shufflers really make only 1 Big Red the right choice in my opinion, especially with the lack of Celine. Triple Spyral Resort, obviously super important in any Spyral deck. I don't really need to explain that. Doubly important now because when you're milling stuff and you still want to resolve your master plan, you don't want to have to waste your shuffler putting back a resort. So, you know, you want your master plan to be able to trigger, so you need a resort in deck, so maxing out so you don't mill all of them is important. Perlarino, gone into enough about this card already. Assault, obviously relevant in Spyral. Scream. This is another card that if you are going to make cuts and include more of to have more, you know, high value mill targets, this is a pretty reasonable card to do to like cut other cards for if you wanted to run more. Fact of the matter is, I'm not summoning tiers as much as pure Tear Ishizu decks, so I'm not like activating Scream very much, so I don't want to run multiple copies of it just as a mill 3. You can still do that, especially if you already have access to both Crime and Soliek, but you know, so I'm only running 1 as a target to send off of Kaleido Heart to search my Crime in case I want to do that little version of the combo. So it's just kind of in there as the mandatory one-of, as an option. Super Poly. I'm pretty big on this card in the 60 card list. It's not necessary in regular Tear Ishizu or lower to the ground, lower than 50 card list of this Spyral Tear Ishizu variant. But, you know, I want to beat Abyss Driller, and this beats Abyss Driller. It fuses off of Abyss Driller and Rule Callus. Even though the Rule Callus bounces back, it's worth it for me to not be under Abyss Driller. And with a Crime active in the format, Forbidden Droplets has lost its luster as a way to out a card like Abyss Driller in the draw phase. So, you know, Super Poly is the card that does that. You just toggle on, Super Poly, play your combo. Rainbow Bridge, I've already mentioned this. Not only does it, you know, send off Curious and send off Flush Barragoods, if it's in your hand and you open with Souls, you can draw a card and add a rescue, or add a Spyral Resort, and normal summon a quick fix and combo from there. You know, all sorts of fun, relevant stuff. Crime, this is your Omni Negate, you need to run 1 of it. It's also nice to have it in the graveyard whenever your Kick Callus gets banished by random BS. Triple Rescue, it's your best mill target in Spyral besides the monsters, so you need to max out on it, and it's like a value thing. And finally, the 2 Soliek. Sometimes you want to send 1 Soliek and still have 1 in your deck to add off of a card like Crime, or Scream. I keep saying Crime, I mean Scream. So, you know, it's good to run 2. You could justify 3, especially in a 60 card variant. So that's the main deck. Pretty self-explanatory in most cases, with a couple of, you know, arguable slots that I'm still messing around with. Anyhow, let's get to the extra deck. And you might notice I'm only running 14 cards, and that's because I think these are the mandatory 14 cards. There is 1 flex spot in this deck, and that is for you to decide. I'll give you some options once I'm going over these, but these are the mandatory ones. Mood Dragon's important for many reasons. It's a 4 for making Abyss Dweller. It's another fusion that you can use to like recycle your your important fusions like Rule Callus and Kaleido Heart, because like you can fuse these guys off with Tears on later turns to go back into Mood Dragon, so they can go into your deck because of the shuffling nature of Tearlaments. So it's like it's a good recursion, or like a recursive resource engine card. It makes Abyss Dweller. It can protect your own cards. It's a great it's your super holy target, right? So it's good for all those reasons. So you do need to run just the 1 Mood Dragon. Kick Callus, Royal Kick Callus too. Get a flex a little bit on that one. Yeah, best monster in the game right now. The most dominant thing to drop into the game since Hulk of Irex, I suppose. This is just unstoppable. Or it's not unstoppable, unbelievably powerful. Obviously, I don't really need to explain it, but you've probably seen it already. Just the backbone of the deck. Dragstapelia, this is like your multiple points of interaction in the deck is like you set up your Rule Callus and your Crime and your Soliek and your Sleeper and your Apo and all that good jazz. And when you start playing on their turn, because, you know, tier cards go to the graveyard. Go figure. You can set up a Dragostapelia as another card in the extra deck to go into. This like lets you play around stuff like Dark World no more and still have a monster interaction, all that good jazz. Roll Kalos, it's like a Solemn Strike that revives itself. It's insane, really awesome monster. It's the main thing you go into with Kit Kalos. Kaleido Heart, this is kind of relevant because you summon it on your opponent's turn to shuffle a card. You can summon it on your turn and pop it with your own Perlarino to send a stream and add access to crime. You know, it's pretty important for a few reasons, but you got to run it. It's like it's another backbone fusion of the archetype. Abyss Dweller, this is the most important card in the extra deck. Even when you can't summon Kit Kalos, try to summon Abyss Dweller because locking your opponent out of the graveyard is important in this format. It's unfortunate that because of the best of one nature too, this format is incredibly heavily dependent on Abyss Dweller. Like everyone's making it even non-tier decks are trying to turbo out Abyss Dweller because it's so necessary in this format. Link Rebo makes Curious, puts Quick Fix in the graveyard. Need it. Double Helix summons Spirals, go figure. Borg Blocker makes Curious, discards Rainbow Bridge and rescue missions and all sorts of jazz. You can even discard, even for no value otherwise, a Shuffler like Keldo or Mudora from your hand, just so you can preemptively have access to Shufflers before your opponent starts doing tier plays. Sprite Elf summons Merly, that's all you really need to know. That's what it does. And it's got the protection effect, which is relevant because you will be using it to protect your guys. Curious, I've already mentioned what Curious does. It sends Rainbow Bridge, it sends Fairy Tale Snow, it can send Rescue Mission, it can send Master Plan. Whatever you need, Curious gets for you. Unicorn Appaloosa and Axis Kotaku are the generic Spiral payoffs, both for going second and for going first. So, that's the 14 card extra deck, everything explained. I'm going to go over the one flex slot you have access to. So, going down the list, you could justify running a second copy of cards like Rule Kalos, or running a second copy of a Kaleido Heart, something like that. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. If you wanted to, you could be a degenerate and throw in a Winda and a Shadal Beast somewhere in here, but that's not my style. Another card that's super important, Zeus. A lot of, especially for pure tier, making Zeus off of a rank 4 like Time Thief Redoer or Baguska or Abyss Dweller is how they out boards. It's just what they do. Zeus is the king of outing boards, so if you want to, make an Abyss Dweller, pop its effect so they can't trigger all their tiers, attack, make Zeus, send everything away, makes sense to me. This is a perfectly reasonable card to add into the extra for those reasons. As far as Link monsters, Nightmare Griffin, interesting idea here. Your opening Spiral play ends up with Helix in the extra monster zone and Curious right below it. So you can like discard a card, draw a card, and reset any of the weird cards you've milled, like a Super Poly. Setting a Super Poly off Nightmare Griffin, very powerful and very tempting. Downside is you have so many effects on your board, you end up having to link off this Nightmare Griffin once you summon it. So it's a little kind of negative value in that sense, but otherwise it's pretty good. Zero Boros. This card outs the field in a similar way to Zeus, but as a Link monster, and plays really well with Snow for an attack boost. If you were going to run Zero Boros, I'd probably cut Axis Code Talker and include an IP Masquerena, and just make this your guy that wins the game instead of Axis Code Talker, but this is a reasonable card to include. What else did I have? Oh, you could throw in Selene if you wanted to. I mean, it still does the same thing it always did in Spiral. It summons Master Plan. So if you don't want to, if you're low on craft materials and you already have Selene from previous iterations, perfectly reasonable card to include in the extra deck. Then there's everyone's favorite Sleepy Boy or Drunk Boy, whichever version you prefer, Baguska. Baguska is another your deck has a lot of rank 4 X's because the Shirin and the Ishizu summon themselves, and Super Agent summons himself, and Snow summons itself. So sometimes you don't really have a whole lot going on, and you just need to end on a rank 4, and Baguska is the best card to end on when all you have is a rank 4. So a lot of tier decks run this as their backup plan, Plan B, Baguska. This is a perfectly reasonable card to throw in that slot as well. If you were going to run Baguska, I would suggest being on Zeus, because Baguska can set people up to set a bunch of cards, and you just need to out those with a card like Zeus. So you use Baguska for a turn, flip them to attack, and go into Zeus. Pretty typical. So you maybe would cut, I don't know, Axis Code Talker maybe. This is maybe you have OTK power through the tier cards. You don't necessarily need Axis Code Talker. So if you wanted to go Baguska Zeus, maybe cut Axis Code Talker as the final, not technically necessary, but necessary in my version of the deck card. So that's the full breakdown. Long-winded as ever, I know. But yeah, this is the version I'm playing. You can cut whatever you want to cut and add whatever you want to add. It's probably all perfectly reasonable because I don't think this is even the best iteration of this version of the deck yet because I haven't finished tuning it. Anyhow, let's get into the very basic Spiral combo that I can show you in a practice situation and let you see how the deck functions. Alright, so here we are in, I guess what I would call practice mode, the solo mode against the poor Monarch bot, who I always abuse in these videos. The funny thing about Tearlaments is it's really hard to do a tutorial or a combo guide or video on it because the tier side of the deck does not play linearly in any way. Spyral has some non-linear components, which is why I like it a lot, but tier has barely any linear components because it's all just random mills and see what happens. But the Spyral side does have some things that I can show you that are definitive and determinative, and I'm going to show you what the Spyral side of the deck does and how it kind of goes from there. So this is Souls plus Quick Fix. We'll go ahead and do that. It's obviously already got access to Pearl Arena because it does have Foolish Burial Goods and Terraforming in hand. But I'm just going to ignore that for the purposes of just demonstrating the combo. So we're going to use Souls plus Quick Fix. Always get the Royal, get a Flex on them. Flex on that Monarch bot. So, we'll do the typical Souls plus Quick Fix stuff. Nothing crazy here. We'll know some good old Quickie Fix. And add the Big Red. One of the fun things about doing Spyral this way is, like, Spyral searches so many cards out of the deck that even when you're running 60, once you get done with the Spyral side of the deck, you have taken out so many cards that you don't really have much left to hit, except you do have, like, non-Spyral cards that you don't search, like, the Magician Souls copies that you can waste mills on, but you're very likely to hit your Tear and Ishizu cards while already accessing the Spyral engine. Now, I'm only going to draw one card off this Souls, because I don't want to risk drawing, like, both the Turtle and the Trap that I want to send with Curious, and, like, it wouldn't be a big deal if I was in a real game, but it's going to be awkward in this combo if I draw them. Drawing Crime isn't such a big deal, but, I'm going to hold this Illusion Cast and show you something funny later. So we're going to go ahead and go into Double Helix. This thing's obviously super insane, but I fished for it, so, just so I could show it off. Anyhow, we'll go ahead and use Master Plan. I gotta keep prompts on because it's a tier deck. So we'll add Sleeper. Super Agent's fairly important in this deck, and in this combo, because you do link off your Helix eventually. So we'll go ahead and use Resort. Add Super Agent after we got our Sleeper. Yoink. And a funny thing about this combo is, we are not summoning Quick Fix with Helix. Ever since we got double hit Quick Fix, we've almost always been summoning Quick Fix off Helix in these basic Spyral combos, these Souls Quick Fix combos. But that's not going to be the case here because we just need to make Borg Blocker and to Curious. And the second Quick Fix, while it does help with that, we are going to get all of our missions eventually anyhow, and we don't really care that much about the Last Resort access, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So we're going to use Quick Fix, obviously, add... Ooh, don't activate that, nope. Add Drone. And now, because I'm not getting the second Quick Fix, I'm technically robbing myself of access to Last Resort in a guaranteed way, but because we're milling so many cards, it's not unlikely to mill the second or third Quick Fix and be able to summon it and get Last Resort later, but it's not that big a deal. So we'll go ahead and do this regular part of the combo, call Monster, and we'll be summoning the other Master Plan. We want to get more cards out of our deck, and that Master Plan is in our deck. Get out of there. There we go. But also because we need to get the Rescue Mission in Graveyard, and I'll show you that in just a second. So we'll go ahead and get Rescue Mission. We'll go ahead and discard this Rescue Mission off of Borg Blocker. Ta-da! And then we can go ahead and make a Link Revo. We've cleared up our zones. At this point, before I go into Curious, I would Rescue Mission back my Master Plan one last time and get that last Rescue Mission out of my deck so I don't have to worry about milling it when I'd rather have it in hand for later in the turn. So we're going to use all this material here. Add a Rescue Mission. We're going to clear up these zones. So we're going to go Curious. 1, 2, 3. And this is important because you don't want to accidentally mill your Pearl Arena while you still have the trap in graveyard. So we're going to send the trap. It's always at the end, so you just scroll to the end. And in Chain to Curious, you will chain the trap so you don't accidentally Curious mill your Pearl Arena or your Tortoise. So the fun thing about this combo is it gets you to Pearl Arena plus an Aqua Monster, and you get a free mill 3 off of Curious. Look at that. So I've got 38 cards left in my deck, and I get a free mill 3, and I got a Midori out of it. Pretty cool. That's a great graveyard shuffle. So before I start going into Agados and Kelbex, I have a shuffler to combat my opponent's cards. So at this point, it's about how do you want to construct your board. So I've got tons of options, but the general way you would do it is, you got Perlerino, use Perlerino. Add designated card to your deck, command deck to hand. We'll add Sheeran, typically. And if I had another tier card in hand before I go into Sheeran, a funny thing you can do is Illusion of Chaos, stack that tier card to the top of your deck if you have one just kind of hanging around. And I'm actually, you know what, I'm going to do that. So we're going to Foolish Burial Goods. Send Soliak. And this is all non-linear at this point. I can't guarantee this is how your turn is going to go because I don't know how it's going to go. All I can do is get you to the Perlerino plus Sheeran. At that point, you got to play the deck on your own. And so, like, what do I want to discard? I want to have a Merly in graveyard because I can go into Sprite Elf if I wanted to. So now I can have this pitch Merly. And I sent a Merly. Oh, I sent my other Soliak, which is kind of annoying, so my Scream's not going to have any value. Except I can Mudora shuffle it back, so we're fine. So we're going to make Kalos using Merly and this random turtle that we don't need anymore. I guess put Merly closer to the top, not that it matters. And we make Kalos. So we're going to... we're not going to Perlerino here, but we're going to kick Kalos effect, and we're going to chain... I'm not going to chain that. We're going to chain Mudora. I want to put these Soliaks back because I want to add them later, and I've got another Mudora in deck. And at that point, I think that's all I want to do, right? I don't want to send any of these other cards back. Sure. So we can go ahead and add the Merly, because we can do the Yonky Splunky, as they like to call it. So add Merly to hand. So the only one I haven't triggered Sheeran or Havness off of the mills, but I'm about to mill a bunch of cards because I've got the Kit Kalos and the Merly set up. I do need to clear my board, but that's not too hard. You'll just like make a Sprite Elf, I guess. We'll just go ahead and get rid of these two. And before you start doing a bunch of crazy plays, you can go ahead and call Monster because you still know the top of their deck. You could have summoned this double agent earlier in the combo, like before you did Curious, maybe, if you didn't do the double Master Plan pay like I did, and you could go into this Abyss Dweller earlier. But, before you do massive mills where you might mill your Kelbeck or mill your Agido, we'll go ahead and set up Abyss Dweller. So Abyss Dweller sends Sheeran. So we can have Sheeran in Graveyard, and then we can get Kalos effect. We can send... Get Kalos. Summon Merly. And you can do the old Mill 8. A funny thing here is if you mill Rhino Heart, you could make Kaleido Heart, and then Perlerino, pop Kaleido Heart, send Scream, add Crime. But yeah, that's not... I've already got the Crime in hand, so that's not how I would play this hand, obviously. But, I've milled the Havness, I milled the Kelbeck, I milled the Agido, and that's what, I've got Abyss Dweller online already, kind of in a guaranteed fashion because I had Super Agent and Sheeran searched. So, we would Agido and Havness. I think you do Havness first, then the mills, just to have more access to cards you want to use and summon, but it doesn't matter. This is just a tutorial, obviously. Ta-da! Now summon Rule Kalos using Havness. And Kit Kalos. Get Royal Kalos over here. And Scream, sure. Not going to use Perlerino. I got Kildo in Graveyard now, that's great. I've got Soliak, there we go. That's the idea. You mill a ton of cards. I got 14 cards left in my deck, which is about where regular tier Ishizu ends up, right? Because I had the Curious, because I had the regular, I had guaranteed access to the Sheeran parts of the deck. I had just tons of mills to go into, and I've milled my deck pretty clean of other cards. So I never milled a second quick fix, I don't think. So like, there's no like play around me like sending rescue and rescuing Last Resort or something and adding Last Resort. But I did mill a Last Resort, so if I wanted to discard this rescue mission off something and rescue mission back Last Resort, that could be a thing, but it's not super important. So now we just need to clear our board. So we can make a little room. So we're just going to make Appaloosa. A fun thing to do is make a really, really big Appaloosa. And if you have like a little extra material hanging around before you go into Real Kalos, you could try to make Appaloosa, but 2 material Appaloosa is good enough. Wait, could I make a 3 material? I don't have anything in my grave I can summon, right? Not really. Nah. Like sometimes you have like extra like rescue mission that you didn't add to hand or something, and you could like make a link to, make a summon that, and then make a 3 material Appaloosa, but that's not really the case here. So we're just gonna make a good old 4 mat Appo or 2 mat Appo, link 4 Appo. And at this point, you get to oh, you could Sprite Elf. That's funny. I could summon the other Merly, I guess, if I had the zones, but I don't. But yeah. Do I have a Link 2 in deck? Maybe that was the right play. No, I don't. Okay, so if you were like playing Dark or something, you could have made Dark there and then made a 3 material Appaloosa. I threw in Zeus instead of Dark. Dark's like another good option. Or IP Masquerena. You'd have an indestructible Appaloosa. That's pretty cool. But, you know, I'm just going to leave Merly on the field because I have Soliak and I have Crime. So you get a special summon Sleeper. You got tons of Spirals in the graveyard for, you know. We'll leave the big red because you can shuffle that back, and we'll leave 1 Spiral Resort because you can shuffle that back, and 1 Master Plan because you can shuffle that back. So you kind of want to leave 1 of everything for shuffling purposes. And at this point, because I already had access to Crime, I'm just going to set that. I'm going to set Soliak to send off my Merly, and we'll set this rescue mission. So, this is the board, more or less, and when you pass to your opponent... oh, you get to add Spyral Resort or Screen back to hand because of Bork Blocker. That's always good to remember. Keep that Spyral Resort in there. And we're going to leave these guys alone. So I've got double shufflers up. I've got Medora and Keldo. So in the draw phase, you would flip Rescue Mission just so you can activate your Sleeper at any point. You don't have to use it now. You can use it later. Then you'll just immediately Dweller on their turn. Goodbye with Helix. And at this point, you can like fuse off this Dweller into like a Mood Dragon later if it comes up to it. But yeah, now you've got double Shuffler, Rescue Mission to add back, Soliak to send Merly and get more fusion plays off, and that's basically it. You know, Crime and all that good jazz. And they're under Dweller, and you've got a protected Appaloosa, and that's just game. Obviously, I don't really need to show me beating the Monarch butt up. But yeah, it was just me kind of ad-libbing a hand. I'm not even sure I played this ideally. There's maybe a line where I could have added Rhino-Heart and had guaranteed access to Kaleido-Heart here. Oh, but I do have Rhino-Heart in graveyard off of the mini mill, so I do have access to Kaleido-Heart when I send with Soliak. So I'm good either way. Another important thing, when you do have access to Crime, make sure you keep a monster in your hand. As you can see, I have this Illusion of Chaos stuck in hand. I would have never discarded this if that was the case, but if you didn't have a monster in hand, like I did, this extra Illusion of Chaos, keep the turtle in hand and see if you can fusion something with just your graveyard so you can discard the turtle with Crime. That's like another intricacy to keep in mind while you're playing this incredibly complicated deck. So yeah, pretty solid inboard, I would say. You know, Soliak, full tier plays, Crime for Omni Negate, Sprite Elf, Abyss Dweller, Appaloosa, and Sleeper to beat Zeus plays, and tons of recursion because you have an extra rescue mission hanging around. You milled so many cards that your Sleeper didn't like banish too many important Spiral names, right? You still have your entire Spiral engine access available. Like when you pop this rescue mission, you can just drone shuffle back your double helix and go into double helix again. You can Mudora shuffle back your double helix and your big red and all that good jazz and your last resort, and just like, you know, you could rescue mission back last resort right now if you don't think your Sleeper is going to die and have it for a grindy game, right? There's just a million things you can do here. And I think it's a valuable aspect of the deck that it has all these extra resources compared to regular TEARLAMENTS. Anyhow, that's a basic combo. Now I'm going to show you me actually playing the deck in a real game that I thought was very fun and very interesting and makes a case for a lot of the decisions that I've made in deck building. Alright, so here we're in a ranked game, and I was basically testing the exact same deck you saw. I think the only difference is I was running a very funny tech that Young, another player, came up with, which was Akashic Magician. You can summon this off of your souls plus your master plan, and then summon Curious below it. And when it's co-linked, you can send 3 cards from the top of your deck to your graveyard, because it's co-linked to a Link 3, which is hilarious. It's not very good, because I don't think it actually triggers the tears or whatever. I just thought it was a funny way to get more cards in the graveyard. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend running this, even if it's fun to play. This hand's obviously insane, even though I'm going second. You know, this is obviously great going second, but Instant Fusion and Pearl Arena are the best cards in a mirror matchup, and surprise, surprise, I'm in a mirror matchup, kind of. I'm playing Spyral and they're not. But I'm going to chain Havness, and my Havness doesn't send anything of importance, and I would say that is almost certainly the weakest part of this deck compared to regular Tear Ishizu. Your Haveness is not as good because you have a bunch of more random Spyral cards that you haven't sussed out of your deck going second yet. Bright side is, if your opponent Ishizu mills a bunch of your cards, you have more gas than them, so you kind of have a different way that you're better going second, but only if they do the Ishizu stuff. Or if you actually hit your mills off of Haveness. You also have less chance of drawing Haveness, which is kind of a big deal when you're going second against Tear. So obviously they're gonna Rhino Heart, which is a 1-card Kikalos. Add Sheeran, sure, makes sense. They haven't used Sheeran effects, they can go ahead and Sheeran, discard Agito, sure. That'll get them, they have Agito and Kelbeck here, so they get a double mill. So we're all milling for 10 here, baby. Let's see what they do. Alright, so they mill, and I mill. Okay, so there's the 5 more mills. Okay, so let's see what they milled. They milled, so here's their opening 3. They milled of relevance. They milled a Mudora. They milled a Merly. They milled the other Rhino Heart. And they milled another Mudora. So they have 1 Shuffler, and they have a Rhino Heart effect to summon itself, and they have the Fusion effect. I, on the other hand, milled Rescue Mission, Quick Fix, Rescue Mission. That's insane. My own Agito, also insane. My own Merly, that's insane. I milled even better than they did. Even though I didn't get a Shuffler, I have way more gas in my graveyard when we're doing this Ishizu BS. So they're going to trigger their Rhino Heart and their Merly. I'm going to trigger my Merly and then chain block it. There's no Rule Kalos up yet, so it's not really that relevant. I'm going to trigger my own Agito because, you know, I want to keep milling. They're going to Mudora to shuffle back my Merly. That's fine. I've still got more tiers to hit. I've still got Spyral cards, and if they're wasting their Shufflers on their turn, on cards that I can just mill on my own turn 2, that's fine by me. So my Agito resolves. I mill a Sheeran and a Haveness and a Kelbeck. My own, you know, the deck just keeps going. Hey, they're playing the turtle too. And they mill, and I milled their Keldo, which sucks for me. That gives them another Shuffler. And Haveness, they get a Fusion Summon, and a Scream, so they get a Search. So, you know, we're all milling crazy. But I would say I've still milled more gas. The only thing I'm short on is I haven't got a Shuffler yet, and that's kind of important. But, you know, we're milling so much that we're going to get to those Shufflers eventually. So they're going to go ahead and make their Rule Kalos, which is a pretty big deal. It'll shut off my next card. But now we get our another set of chain links. This is a super complicated situation, and they send a Soliak off of the Rhino Heart resolution, so they get to resolve Soliak, they get to resolve Scream, and here's my first mistake, and you know, this is due to inexperience with the deck. I should not trigger both TEARLAMENTS, because I see that they have a Keldo in the graveyard. They can shuffle both and rob me of 2 effects for the price of 1. You know, that's all of my tier names, so I'm not summoning any more tiers, and that's very silly. So, I'm not sure, what should I should, because I have Haveness on the field, I can't potentially mill a Haveness anymore. So I should trigger the Haveness, I guess, and they would just shuffle it back. But, you know, I have a chance to mill another Sheeran, so I would just leave Sheeran in the graveyard and hope I mill the second Sheeran later. So that would be the ideal way to play this, but, you know, it's probably not going to matter because I'm not likely to mill that last Sheeran, but it would be better to do that. On the bright side, I also encourage them to shuffle back my Sheeran, which, you know, might be relevant on my next turn. So that's something. You know, I have, this guy just put tons of gas back into my deck to stop me from playing on his turn, and I still get to do this BS with Rescue Mission. Use up his Rule Kalos, that's fine, no big deal. So, you know, just in case, so if I had not wasted my Sheeran, that Rule Kalos would have been better, but I should have just let him send back my Rescue Mission, to be honest. So, we mill 5 more, and I did mill the second Sheeran, which is a big faux pas on my part. You know, if I had played that correctly, I would be summoning Kick Kalos right now, which would be awesome. But I've already used Haveness, so the Kick Kalos wouldn't let me be playing on their turn much more, but I would have Kick Kalos for their turn, which would like induce a Soliak or something. So, you know, you live and learn. I don't think it's going to make a big deal in the long run, because, like, I don't think I was getting to anything major, but I did mill the Rainbow Bridge, which I can trigger on their turn, to add a Spyral Resort before I mill any more. And get the turtle out of my deck so I don't draw it, which is pretty solid. So, this hand, I activated Haveness, and I ended up with 7 cards in hand going into my turn 2. Pretty cool, right? So they're going to Kaleido Heart here, because I just think they had nothing better to do. They're going to shuffle back my Haveness, because they want to keep me off names, I guess, but I like having that Haveness in deck. And they're going to make Abyss Dweller. So that's the real crux of everything. Abyss Dweller is OP. But, you know, I can Rescue Mission at the end of their turn and summon a Super Agent. Do you see what I mean? You see, like, we did this whole nonsense, we all milled 20 cards BS, and at the end of it, I'm still playing on his turn, right? I get a Rescue Mission pop a back row with my Super Agent that I milled. that's just insane that I get to do that on their turn, and I get rid of their freaking Omni Negate. You know, if I got rid of Soliak, that'd be just as good. Soliak's still a great interaction here, and obviously I'm showing you this replay because I get to do cool stuff and win. I had to draw the Super Poly to out the Abyss Roller. That's just how life is, and I did. That's why you play it. But on the bright side, I did mill a lot of cards, so it wasn't actually. I think I milled the other 2 Super Poly, so that was a 1 in 39 chance. I still had ways to play the game because I could like just go for straight for Sleeper at this point, but and like attack over Abyss Driller and Sleeper Pop and do all sorts of funny stuff. But I don't have to because I drew Super Poly, right? I can still play the game, but I'd have to play the game at a Driller, which is no fun. So we get to have fun. So we're gonna fusion some of these off and do a Moo Dragon, and they're going to obviously get the Rule Callous effect. Collider Heart gets to send back my because a Tearlaments was fused or whatever. They get a Collider Heart, and I'm going to go ahead and use this King of the Swamp because I just might as well. I think this was also a misplay. I chose Earth because I wanted to protect my quick fixes, but I have Spy Resort, right? They can't Soliac my quick fix. I should have made this Moo Dragon a Dark, so they can't Soliac my Kit Kalos later. I've got, because I wasn't really thinking that I had the Spy Resort to protect my quick fix. That was a very silly maneuver on my part. But, I was doing it just in case, like, they ended up removing my Spyro Resort, and, like, I want my Super Agent to resolve here. But they're going to Rule Kalos. They're going to waste the Rule Kalos on my Super Agent, which is cool, because I have tons of gas left over. They've even got an Instant Fusion left over. So they're going to go ahead and, Kaleido Heart gets them. There you go. Send back Kaleido Heart. Send Havnus. Havnus can trigger. They get to start playing on my turn. Summon Kit Kalos. But, so that's one name down, and this is kind of like the thing you got to keep track of when you're playing these tier decks. They've only got so many activations, so this guy's going to kick Kalos me. Add a Havnus so he can mill, that's fine. So I'm going to get Quick Fix, I'm going to resolve it. I'm going to try to, encourage his Havnus so I can see what he's playing with. Nothing, okay, so I'm going to Big Red. I'm going to bring back the Super Agent to pop their back row. They have to answer that, and they're going to waste a Shuffler. You see how much gas I have? I'm playing through their Shufflers more than a regular tier deck can. So I'm just going to play another Spy Resort. Thanks. I'm going to add Master Plan here, because I don't think they've got any more interaction to stop me searching, otherwise I would stop it there. Now I could just go ahead and add Sheeran. Well, well, well. So there's an argument here for me doing Instant Fusion before I do Sheeran, because that would get me Kit Kalos for free. But I don't. There's like a world where my Kit Kalos gets negated, and I don't want it being destroyed in the end phase because of Instant Fusion's effect. So I'm just kind of holding on to this Instant Fusion in case it matters. I might use it to summon the Moo Dragon if I shuffle it away for a special summon and like make a Abyss Roller of my own, right? It's relevant to keep in hand. But sending Master Plan and milling him early, using the Turtle, because why not? Turtle's funny. And I get my own Kit Kalos. Now, if I had made my Kit Kalos a Dark, I'd be immune to their Soliac here, which is a big mistake on my part. I add Rhino Heart because I want to have access to my own Kaleido Heart, and I don't... Have I milled a Rhino Heart yet? I don't think I did, right? Yeah, so that's why I searched it, because I did want to have access to that. So I'm going to use my Pearl Arena to force their back row, and they're going to negate my Kit Kalos. That's fine. I've churned through almost all of my opponent's activations. They do get one more mill here. We'll see where that goes. And, they've got a lot of gas left in their deck, obviously, but they've gone through Havnus already. So they're going to Kit Kalos, and they're going to get the mills, right? They're going to get a Medora, which doesn't matter. They get a Rhino Heart, which they can do the Rhino Heart play with and send the Merly, and that'll trigger the Merly in hand. Sure, okay. And I think my opponent messes up here, but this only matters because I messed up. They're going to fuse away their Dragus Tapelia. I don't think it's that big a deal in the end because I had this Instant Fusion kind of hanging around. So they triggered their Sheeran, which they shouldn't have done, and they get a Moo Dragon for their troubles because it's their only legal summon at this point. I think they're out of fusion summons, so they wasted a monster negate here. And once I see that they've got nothing left, I know they've gone through they've gone through, I've popped Crime, I've popped Soliac, they've gone through Havnus, Sheeran, Kaleido Heart, Merly, Rule Kalos, Havnus on field effect. They've gone through everything that I can think of. I can just commit to a final play here. And funnily enough, I've still got gas, baby. I got Borg Blocker. I could just link everything off and go right into everyone's good friend Curious. And Curious is going to get me into more Spiral plays. A funny thing here is I have to out their board still, because there's still a lot of bodies to get through before I go for a lethal line. So I have to do some funny stuff here. So this is my last mission. I have the assault mission, and it's actually very pertinent that I get to add assault mission. I'm going to show you a very funny play here. So I'm going to add assault mission, go right into Axis Code Talker, and chain block my master plan with Axis Code Talker, which they can't respond to, which is very funny whenever you get to do it, but not relevant here because my opponent's out of stuff to do. I'm going to add Sleeper, and I get to add Resort, and I'm going to use Resort to add Drone. You don't see that all very often off of a master plan resolution, but that's the only card I need at this point. I can summon Sleeper, just pop their Mood Dragon just to like make sure they can't stop my Sleeper here, and then I can go ahead and use Assault Mission to give my Sleeper something to pop without wasting my Resort. But more importantly, I can get Assault Mission in the graveyard for free. They're going to have this, but they got nothing left. They've used all their effects. I don't care. Now I can Assault Mission, summon my Drone, stack their deck. Now I can just kind of clear their board with whatever Access Code activations I've got left. And I can go into everyone's good friend, Double Helix. So now, what am I doing? I am playing around nothing, really. It doesn't matter. But I need to get lethal, and I'm out of pops. So I'm going to link off my Drone and my Sleeper to make Double Helix, because I can just add Sleeper back to hand. And I've still got a million Spyral names in graveyard that I can get rid of to summon Sleeper again, and just attack for lethal. The game was very tight at this point on time purposes. I might have actually known every card in their hand. I'm not sure. I wasn't keeping track, but I should attack with Axis Code Talker here first, because this would make it so I don't lose to like a random Imperm in their hand. But if they had Imperm, they would have said it, so I'm not that worried about it. But, you know, it would have been better to attack with Axis Code Talker there. But, as you can see, I used every single tool I had at my disposal to win that game, besides Instant Fusion, and besides correctly using my Mud Dragon. I should have called Dark, not Earth. And there you go. Actual gameplay with the deck. That's really it. That's I think the best showcase of this deck playing against tier that I could have, right down to the tech option in Super Poly, to the crazy amounts of gas that I had to completely resource my opponent, and the way I abused the Ishizu Millers more than my opponent could. Anyhow, let's get to the wrap up. Alright, so here's the deck one last time, just kind of give you a quick review of it, but something I wanted to show you before I signed out here was a slimmer version of the deck that maybe is appealing to more people. There's a Spyral Tear Slim version that I've got that's only running 50, and you'll see it's got some fairly noticeable differences. It's not running the Crystal Beast Rainbow Bridge trap card turtle thing set up. It's also running only 50 cards because you get to cut Foolish Burial Goods when you're not running the Rainbow Bridge, and it's doing a Destrudo for Ancient Fairy Dragon setup. Now, the downside of this is you do not get to access Perlarino before your Curious Mills. That said, you still have Shuffler, so you could just shuffle back your Perlarino, use Destrudo's Ancient Fairy Dragon, pop your Resort, add Perlarino. That gets you into the tier line as well. This is a more condensed way to get to it, so you don't have to run Turtle and Trap. You can just run Destrudo, and Destrudo's like a generically good card to have in the graveyard as well. It doesn't get you the second Aqua Monster, but because you're only running 50, your mills are a lot more likely to have the monsters that you need to go into your tier place. So it's kind of like the trade-off you're making. This is like how I got to a much smaller version of the deck. And as you can see, I did cut Last Resort in this version. I've gotten down to one less Super Poly. I even cut 1-for-1, just kind of like trying to only keep the really important stuff. I was even considering cutting some copies of Souls and Illusion of Chaos, but I do love the cheeky interaction of Soul stacking in a Shizu or a Tier to the top of your deck before you go into a mill. So, you know, bear with me on that. I just think that's funny. But otherwise, it's basically the same concept. Curious gets you access to Perlarino via Destrudo this way, and you do all those same plays you saw me do, but with Ancient Fairy Dragon instead, which is fun. But I don't think this is as good conceptually, because against the opponent, if they mill on their turn and they mill your Rainbow Bridge, you just get to freaking go hog wild and add a Perlarino for their next turn, which is insane. And Destrudo doesn't get to do that. Destrudo is really susceptible to like Abyss Dweller because you can only do it on your turn as opposed to their turn, so you don't get that value immediately. And you have to waste your one flex slot on an Ancient Fairy Dragon. But that's the price you pay for getting to run only 50 cards. You can even like maybe justify like cutting a quick fix out of this list, even though that seems like sacrilege. It's not necessary, and you're not even searching Last Resort. It only searches 2 cards in this deck, so you know having a tons of quick fixes even isn't necessarily great. But yeah, the basic idea is the same, and you still end up with like the extra rescue mission set for sleepers, so you don't need Last Resort as much. An important thing to note, if you are playing this way without Last Resort, If your opponent threatens to pop your sleeper and or run over it in battle and trigger its graveyard effect, you can chain snow and banish your sleeper and get an interaction out of it while you're doing that to protect your own board. So that's like a relevant thing to remember. Banishing your own sleeper doesn't sound nice, but you've probably already used its effect by then. And if not, well, it's better than losing your entire board to your own dumb card because you cut Last Resort for consistency reasons. But yeah, that's the 2 versions of the deck I've been playing with and working on. I hope y'all enjoyed that, and if you did, let me do the YouTube spiel. Like, comment, subscribe, and that's it for me. I might have like more tuned versions of this deck or more gameplay videos with it because it's tier format, baby. That's all we're playing these days, even in Spyral. So that's the only content I'm gonna have for the next month until they ban my perfect royal waifu over here. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a good one. See you next time, etc., etc. Bye.